Welcome to My Life, Tanya Applied, with Rabbi Simon Jacobson, a journey into the deepest teachings of Torah and their application to our personal, emotional, and psychological lives.
A good tevach, a good week. We continue our journey in the life-changing Sefer Tanya. This program is in honor of our greatest heroes of all, the tzaddikim, the ones that stand on the front lines to protect and defend our holy brothers and sisters in the Holy Land. May they be protected by Hashem. May they finish their job. May we have shalom in Eretz Yisrael and Eden everywhere and shalom in the whole world. And the schus of learning Tanya, Chassidus, Primis HaTeira, like the Zohar says, that B'hei Chibura Dilach, which means through Primis HaTeira, Yafkun Yisrael, Mebei Galusa, Eden will come out of Golus. This program is made possible by Arena Lights LLC, and it is in honor and memory of Rabbi Yosef Halevi Weinberg Olav Shalom, Rabbi Moshe Pinchas HaKoyen Katz Olav Shalom, Rabbi Yael HaKoyen Kan Olav Shalom, and it is in the schus and merit of Rabbi Zev Yecheskel HaKoyen and Risha Katz, La'erich Yomim V'Shanim Tevis, for many long, healthy years. We are close to the end of chapter 16, Perek Zayin in Tanya, with Alter Rebbe, in his, of course, inimitable way, describing the processes of how we use our mind and our hearts, our cognitive and emotional faculties, to become more refined, to become more godly, become more divine human beings. Namely, we're talking about the Beinoni, Sefer Shel Beinonim, whose focus began in chapter 12, and we went through chapter 12, 13, 14, 15, and now we're in 16, which will be the concluding chapter about the Beinoni, with chapter 17 to bring it all together. But the analysis of the Beinoni, which is the average person, meaning that which is expected of all of us, things that are not in our power are not in our power. You can't be someone that you don't have any potential for. A tzaddik, like we learned, but also tzaddikim, it's a particular type of soul. You can do things that would ultimately be rewarded with a b'chinas ibur of a neshama of a tzaddik, like we learned earlier. But that comes from above. But what is in our power? Midas kol adam v'acharei kol adam yimshech. The power is to control your mind, and in turn, give birth to your emotions. That's the ultimate Aveda. Like he made it clear in chapter 16, the two klolim, the klal gadol in the beginning of the chapter. It's not just about controlling your behavioral, meaning your thought, speech, and action, but it's about your transforming yourself and working yourself, arbet nafzich, to turn yourself into something more refined through contemplation and through the emotions that it gives birth to. To be me'ach shalat al alev, with the mind controlling the heart and thus impacting and subduing, controlling and refraining, following the animal soul, and being a more godly person. That results in a thought, speech, and action that is pure and not and controlled by the divine soul. And the second klal gadol, that even if you don't come to that type of palpable, full, fiery, passionate emotions, which we're all quite aware of, usually in material things, don't think it's all or nothing. Because the fact that you contemplate and it awakens some type of feeling, even though it's not that fiery passion, what he calls bizgalus libe, and revealed in your heart, but it's there, your mind appreciates. And your heart senses that this is valuable, fitting, also like he said, it's fitting and worthy of you to love God. In contrast to material things, that is not just meant to be, that should not be dismissed. That has tremendous power. It's tremendous power because that ultimately is the cause of why you're doing what you're doing. You're not just doing it out of blind obedience. You just have not reached that type of level of emotional, being consumed emotionally with the divine. But you have contemplated, and you have felt and sensed the value in it, and that has therefore the effect And machshava dibur ma'aser, like he says, k'shamayim bein zeh betalumes tfunas liba yemeche. That's what he calls tfunas tfilas liba b'meche. It's talumes in the heart, and what he called before ava musateres b'meche, in the mind, that you are sensing it and appreciating it. The exact lashon that he says is this. That it's in the form of chachmas of ava musateres, as I said, and talumes libe. So that has an effect as well. He's calling it tfuna, because tfuna means it's not just an abstract intellectual idea like bina. It's tfuna that relates to midas. So it affects you like as if it was that revealed and palpable love. Is because this concentration, your effort in your mind, which brought you to be Isaac in Torah mitzvahs, so it's not coming out of by rote or mechanically, either because you're naturally inclined that way, or it's second nature through regilus, through training yourself. As we learned in chapter 1, there's an aveda going on here. It's not lo avodah. It's through your contemplation. However, you haven't reached that type of fiery passion or revealed. So as a result, that it's coming from that effort, and not just the inclinations of your body, which is not just the natural inclinations, and it's not coming that you're following just what your bodily needs are. And even someone who's naturally inclined to learn also loves his body more b'tivei. Since there's that aveda, so it has an impact on your Torah mitzvahs as if you actually had the palpable love. Now, how can you say that? So the Alter Rebbe continues, and what we learned in the last class, that this is merumas romzu charazal in the statement machshava teva HaKadosh Baruch Hu mitzarfa l'maisa. So what is that statement saying? That when you have machshava teva, and what he's explaining machshava teva is this tvuna, this contemplation that leads to a feeling, but it's not a palpable feeling of love like you would have to something in a revealed way. It's betalumas libe. The Eibishter goes and attaches that mitzarfa to the maisa that you do, and that fills the gap and compensates for the lack of the palpable emotion bizgalus libe. Yeah, the expression was ava musuteres b'mechi v'talumas libe. Yeah. So let's go summarize what we learned about this. Why doesn't it say Maila lava kosev kilu osa? Havalei l'meimed, Alter Rebbe asks. What's the expression mitzarfa? Could have said, when you have a good thought, the Eibishter rewards you and considers it like you did it. So he says no, because what's happening here is that even if you don't have the chilav v'rechima, the ava v'yira bizgalus libe, which then in that case it's very clear that they're like wings that take your ma'aseh ha-mitzvahs, your thought, speech, and action, and elevate it like a bird flying, soaring to heaven, because it's coming into the heart, like he explained, and the heart is a physical matter. So it serves as an interface. Your emotions that you're feeling in your heart is like kishare vorim shem klei ma'aseh, but it's the pnimi v'chayis behem. So that emotional experience, we're talking about galus libe. It serves like wings that elevate them. But now, why do we need the mitzarfa l'maisa? Because what happens, like he said in this case, en yode masagas, he's not capable of reaching that place. Is not in that case. Why? Because you're not feeling it palpably in your heart. When your heart is pumping, your heart is aching, and with passionate love to God, obviously, that will elevate your actions that are directed toward godliness. But when it's only betalumis libe, which means you haven't gotten to that point of palpable love. So he says, so now it's not, your heart is not consumed with it. So govei drachem l'mayla mayla mebchinas hamaisa. Because the tchila v'rechimu here is, whether it's in the mayach, what he called before, in the contemplation. In the moyach, the ava mesuteres b'meiche v'talumis libe. So it's not, your heart is not fully. So then, therefore, it's somewhat removed from the maisa, and you want it to be something that affects it. Like we said, it should affect it just like the palpable emotion. So who compensates for that? And that's where he says. So therefore, it's a mile b'chinas hamaisa. V'ef shalahem lislabish. It's not like, wings, for example, the wings of a bird are part of the bird. So the whole bird gets elevated. But let's say the bird is not, the wings are not really attached to the bird. Just to give an example. It's not integrated. It's not part of the bird. It's still there to some extent, but the bird needs more support. And so therefore the wings themselves don't have the power to be mislabish chinas ma'aseh mitzvos, because the meichin achayis la'leisen lefarch leila. It's meichin, and even talumis libe. But remember, moyach, even though it also drives the body like the heart, but the heart is far more what he called before psari. It's something far more connected to chumri. He said, ki alevu gam ken chumri. The mind is not as chumri as because it's the blood. The blood is something much more tangible. Same thing, emotions are much more tangible. The mind is somewhat more removed. And here, even the talumis libe, the emotions that you sense in your emotions that this is worthy of being loved, is still not quite as palpable. So they can't really serve like wings that lift the bird up. In this case, to lift the aveda up. Im loisha kodesh baruch hu mitzarfen u'mechaben lebchinas hamaisa. Without God, who is the one that mitzarfun, that binds and connects, in a sense, like make sure that these wings do serve to elevate. So now we have this additional element, God's intervention. And that intervention causes that even if you don't have that full palpable emotion, Hashem makes sure that whatever you do have is going to work to elevate and infuse your thought, speech, and action with the klal gadol, the second one, that you're not just doing it mechanically. You're doing it as a result of your contemplation emotions, and God is compensating by causing that to be the one that elevates, as if it was done by somebody who so in other words, a person who can reach it on their own is galus libe, does not need the mitzar for the ma'aseh. But the rest of us do. So the Alter Rebbe is, of course, covering the bases, because a beinoni we're looking for is for all people. Not just someone who's able to reach that type of palpable love. And now we know why, because mitzvah for l'maisa. That's what the Eibishter does. Mitzvah for mechaben lebchinas hamaisa. Attaches and joins this sense in your mind, this emotion in your heart that feels it's worthy, it's appropriate to love God, it's worthy. And that's what happens. And then the Alter Rebbe continues. V'hein hanikrois b'shem machshava teva. These feelings that come from the Ava Mushatez b'moiche, because he's contemplating and appreciating, and b'talumis libe. So why is it called machshava teva mitzarfa l'maisa? It should be called midah. It's a midah. Why is it called machshava teva? That's what the Alter Rebbe addresses now. Why is it called machshava teva? A good thought. Because ke'enon tchila v'rechima mamash bizgalus libe. Because though the Eibush is fascinating, connecting it to make it, to infuse the Torah mitzvahs with that type of level of chayis and elevate it in that way, but it itself is at tchila v'rechima is not bizgalus libe. Ki im betfunas meiche v'talumis libe kanal. It's in Tfunas Meiche which means it's in the understanding, appreciation in your mind, the discernment in your mind, and the hidden places in the heart, which means your emotions are feeling something, but not quite that palpable emotion. So therefore, the Gemara uses the word thought, because what you feel on that level is somewhat detached from a full-blown emotion. So it resembles more thought than feeling. That's machshava teva. So even the diuk of machshava teva, Kodesh Baruch Hu mitzarf l'maisa, but the Eibishter through mitzarfa, through his effort, is adding that element that's missing for those that cannot reach that level of a palpable emotion. In psychological terms, there's a concept that some have coined the cognitive life raft, which means when your emotions are not there yet, and this is something that everybody who's growing or dealing with any type of emotional challenges, whether it's fears or insecurities, or things that happened to us in our childhood, traumas, disturbing events that affect us, that cause us to be hesitant or indecisive, because we're not sure. It's not just possible to tell someone and say, hey, don't be so afraid and just go for it. Someone grew up, let's say, in a home that had a very unhealthy marriage, the parents. So it's natural that a child's going to be afraid to go into a relationship because they don't want to have the same thing. So you can't just tell someone, hey, just get over it, because it's deeply rooted. They need to grow into it. Like it isn't anything. Go tell a child who's, let's say, scared of the dark, and say, don't be afraid of the dark. There's nothing here. There's no monsters. I'll open up the closet. Because it's not an intellectual the exercise or discussion. It's not, you'll say, I'm going to prove to you that something's wrong. That there's nothing wrong. I'll prove to you there's nothing wrong. You can't do that. You can't tell the child that there's no monsters, and just because it's not logical. It's emotional. So what's one of the ways how you grow out of such irrational fears? So there's the thing called the mind. You tell someone, imagine a scenario like this. I'm not asking you to come to a place that you feel is not safe. But imagine, have a nice dream, a nice thought, that you'll be calm and relaxed in a very comfortable place. So even if you're not there, the mind has the capacity to conceive of something, like a cognitive life raft, that helps you get to a place with your mind. And your mind starts imagining this is possible. Slowly it affects your emotions as well. The emotions say, I can consider this. It may take time to build that safety net, to build that comfort, to build the ability to trust, but you can get there. A full emotion means when you fully feel safe and you feel that trust. But that doesn't mean we can't work toward it. That's the process that's called maturity. You help people with their minds to go to places that their emotions are afraid to go to. And then the emotions learn and become educated. And they say, you know what? Let me peek out from my little corner. Maybe it is safe to go. And slowly acclimate yourself. In a way, you could say the source of this concept is from Tanya. I don't know if I've seen it elsewhere before, because Alter Rebbe is saying exactly that. That's what we have the power to do. If we were just wired individuals, like an animal is wired a certain way, a prey is prey, a predator is a predator, you cannot develop and mature the emotions of an animal. It will follow its natural wiring, its natural clockwork, just as much as you can't change the nature of a plant or of a mineral or of the celestial bodies, the sun or the moon. But a human being is given intelligence, and we're given emotions that we can work on. What yesterday you may not have understood, you can understand today. And that's called Avodah. Like we learned in chapter 15, it's not just how you're wired. We're expected. That's the main thing, as he says in the first Klal Gadol in this chapter 16, is to work on yourself. And that you use your mind. Your mind expands your horizons, allows you to see a bigger picture, and in turn affects your emotions in a way that you can actually become more mature and appreciate greater things. So when you're a child, you appreciate little toys and games. An adult, you appreciate greater things. That's what the Alter Rebbe is teaching us, the process of refining ourselves in that way. And when you do that, so first of all, you've grown, even if you haven't reached the destination. Secondly, Hashem is helping, mitzarfa. He takes what you have done and compensates and helps create the full experience. So it's not just a matter, either you're going to be behavioral and just do it by rote or mechanically, or you have the full-blown emotions. It's who you are, wherever, in whatever situation. B'chol levavcha, b'chol nafshecha, b'chol meidecha. Do your effort. Levavcha, nafshecha, meidecha. And Hashem will already compensate and provide as if was b'izgalas libei. So your work is the machshava teva. That's how he's describing that here. This is somewhat reminiscent, if I may add, to what we learned in Perek Yud Gimel in Tanya. In Perek Yud Beis, the Alter Rebbe talks about that we're naturally wired with moyach shal tal alev. I know I use the word wired. It's not really the right word to use, but we naturally have the ability of moyach shal tal alev, which means the ability to control ourselves, the ability to grow, the ability to allow your mind, your reflective mind, to keep at bay the impulsive emotions of the nefesh habamis, of the animal soul. In chapter 13, he adds that when a person allows the nefesh halikis to speak and the nefesh habamis to speak, then comes the third shefet, the Eibishter, Sad Yemine stands on the right side, and you have two against one. Then now you have the Imoli HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ezrei, you have the Ezra HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So there too you see that besides the Eibishter creating us in a way of Moich Shal Ta'alev, of self-control, that he actually, when we exercise it, we get additional strength that God gives us. In a way, it's not exactly the same idea, but the same thing here. Your efforts, as much as you can do, leads to a place where you get the Mitzarfa L'maisa, that you're also getting the emotional value, that you're also experiencing an emotional way. Even though you yourself on your own, you could only get to that far emotionally to connect to God, and that's because we're material human beings, or like he said in the first Hagah in Tanya earlier, because Tfuna is still a state of Ibud, we haven't developed yet, not because of lack of Aveda, but because the person is still in a state of, we'll say a state of gestation, not yet. I have here too that the Eibishter intervenes and sees your effort and adds what's needed to add to help raise your emotions to a higher level. But this is coming from the HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mitzarfa L'maisa. That's why it's called Machshava Teva Kein D'chil R'chi Mamish B'izgal Ki'im B'tfunus Meich V'talum Mitzlibay K'niska Li'il, as was mentioned earlier. Now comes a Hagah, a second gloss that the Alter Rebbe adds. In this gloss, what he adds now is, number one, he adds how this works in the Sfiras Elyenis. That this idea can be traced to its root. We talked about it more on a psychological application in personal life, but also in the Sfiras that talk about Moichin, Midas, and Machshava Dibur Maisa, we also find this dynamic. First read. What he's going to explain here is, as I said, number one, how this works in the spiritual worlds in the Sfiras, and he's also going to explain with this Hagah the very nature, because it seems like a little odd that we're jumping from the fact that you can discern with your mind and appreciate with your heart, and you appreciate the need to love God, and that should be connected to affect your machshava dibur ma'aseh, even though you don't have a palpable emotion. How does that play itself out in a deeper level? And this is what the Alter Rebbe says. He says like this: K'moshe kosav shekosav b'zeir ve'etz chaim. It says in Zeir and Eitz Chaim, the tfuna esi is ben ubas. Remember that tfuna is the letters ben and bas, son and daughter. Remember, tfuna is the word he used earlier, not bina. Bina is contemplation after chokhmah, after the nekuda, you understand, you conceive of an idea, then you understand it in bina. It's still divorced, it's understanding the idea abstractly. You're not that discussing how it relates to you. What should be your conclusion from what you've just learned? Just use a very physical example. You have somebody who wants to come and wants you to invest in their business. So initially you say, listen, I'm busy, I have my own things. They say, no, at least listen to my proposal. And the person makes a very good pitch and a very good case. And your mind listens and says, oh, interesting. But you're not yet ready to invest. Your mind understands it. Even your heart gets a certain sense that this may be something to look at. Then there's the tfuna. That's still an intellectual idea. You may say, go to my friend, he may invest. But tfuna is when seichel starts thinking, what is in it for me? How am I going to benefit or not benefit from it? So that's already where seichel is beginning to relate to midas. So it says in Zohar Neitz Chaim, the Zohar it says Chelik Gimel, volume 3, Reish Tzadik Beis, 290b, and Neitz Chaim it's 15:4 Shar Tezvav Perik Dalet. What does it say? That tfuna, the letters for tfuna, which is the intelligence, some people call it discerning, some people call it the mind as it begins to relate to, the objective mind beginning to relate to what we benefit or don't benefit, begins to subjectively relate to the person. Not subjective in a negative way. It means that the objectivity of the mind has now come to say, let's come to a conclusion. What does it mean? What does it mean for me? So that tfuna, it says, contains the letters Ben, Beis Nun, and Bas, Beis Sof. Tfuna. Why? Because it's referring to the reverence and love which are generated by tfuna. So in other words, the process goes, we learned earlier in Perek Gimel, we learned about how Chochmah and Bina contemplate, conceive and contemplate, and then through Das, iskashus of the father and the mother, which is Chochmah and Bina, it gives birth to midas. What's the birth? Birth is children, son and daughter. What's son and daughter? Or in this case, just is the difference between reverence and love, tchila and rechima. Now, in the best scenario, it's bizgalus libe. It gives birth to full, passionate, and palpable emotions. But Alter Rebbe adds, but ulapomim hatfuna yeredas liyas meichen benukva de zoy rampin. Sometimes the meichen, the tfuna, I should say, which has not become a palpable emotion. It goes down directly, bypasses the emotions of Zoyer Ampin. Because Zoyer Ampin is Chesed, Gvura, Teferes, Netzach, Eid Yesod, the main emotions, and it goes right into Malchus, which is Maisa. So the mind energy goes straight into Nukva, which is the Shehena Esius HaTeira VaMitzvahs. These are the letters of Teira and Mitzvahs, Malchus. V'amaskil Yovan, and the wise will understand. So what is the Alter Rebbe saying here? That you see now in the Sfira is the same idea. Machshava Teva is Tfuna. Tfuna is the lower level of Seichel that should be giving birth to Midas. Bizgalus Libe would be Midas, Chesed, Gvura, and all the Midas. When it's not Bizgalus Libe, but Talumis Libe, so then it's bypassing the Midas and goes straight into Malchus, into Maisa. That's Machshava Teva, because Baruch Hu Mitzaref L'Maisa is Mitzaref the Tfuna to the Maisa, and so-called compensating for the lack of the palpable emotion. That's what the Alter Rebbe says here. So therefore, even though it's only Tfuna, it will inspire action directly without necessarily having the medium of palpable emotions, because Hashem fills the path and makes sure that connection is made, like we spoke before. And well, this will stop here. We're going to have a gute Woche. TanyaApplied.com is the place you can find all previous programs. And we will continue our journey in the conclusion of chapter 16 next week. Everyone be well, and we should only hear good news, Psudas Tevis, a good Chedesh Tevis. Tevis also from the word good. Only good things, Begoli B'Tev Hanira V'Anigla.
This has been My Life, Tanya Applied with Rabbi Simon Jacobson. Please join us again next week. Visit ChasidusApplied.com for archived classes and more resources.